This video is brought to you by Squarespace, Rare, Mojang, ZeniMax, Activision Blizzard. Over the past 6 years, Microsoft has been on a spending spree, acquiring all these studios and publishers. And at first I was like, okay, Microsoft finally whipping out their ultimate weapon, the unlimited wallet domain expansion to secure some studios and get some AAA bangers onto the Xbox platform to finally compete with Sony and Nintendo. Me and a bunch of other people thought that they were playing 3D chess, but following news that they're shutting down Tango Gameworks, Arcane Austin, and a couple of other support studios following their Bethesda acquisition, it's bringing up a lot of questions. Is there still hope for the Xbox brand, or did they make an $80 billion mistake? In today's video, we're going to take a look at Microsoft's other gaming studios that aren't being shut down, take a closer look at their output, and really determine whether or not these acquisitions have been worth it. And we'll also maybe discover some studios that are also on the chopping block following the closures of Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks. Let's discuss. So let's go over some of the major acquisitions that Microsoft has completed since 2018. I'm thinking off the top of my head, Rare, Mojang, ZeniMax, which includes Bethesda, id. It used to include Tango Gameworks, Arcane Austin, Arcane Leon, Activision Blizzard, obviously the most recent and the most major, but it also includes individual studio buyouts as well, such as Ninja Theory, Obsidian, inXile, Compulsion Games, and also Double Fine. I can't forget those guys. Now, of course, since buying these studios and these publishers, Microsoft and Xbox are reaping the rewards of the games that they made prior to being bought out. For example, after the Fallout show dropped and everyone rushed to go play Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, even though Microsoft didn't directly have any sort of involvement with those games, they're still reaping the benefits and getting money from every one of those purchases. So business-wise for them, securing that back catalog was probably very, very important, but as fans, we were promised new things. So let's go ahead and focus on what they've accomplished post-acquisition, these studios, these publishers. The first thing that Rare shipped out after they got bought out by Microsoft was Sea of Thieves, and at the time people were like, what the hell? This makes no sense. Rare is known for single-player games, and this is a multiplayer live service pirate game. Still had the charm and the art style of Rare's other games, but other than that, it was a vast departure from what they usually do. But weirdly enough, Sea of Thieves, since it launched in 2018, has become one of Xbox's most successful original IPs to come out over the past couple of years. When it launched, again, back in 2018, it wasn't available on Steam. But 3 years later, in 2021, it still managed to sell 5 million copies on Steam alone. And that's pretty impressive considering that it's always been on PC Game Pass. People could have easily played it as part of a subscription, but they chose to buy it. To date, it's reached something like 35 million, 40 million players. And again, that doesn't mean 40 million people bought the game, but still, that's pretty damn impressive. Critical reception, it's hard to kind of analyze because when it first came out, people were like, this game is okay, like the water is pretty, I guess, and it's fun to sail a ship with your friends, I guess. But when it first launched, it had some pretty mid-ass reviews, and I remember playing it back in 2018. It was my first experience with Game Pass on console, and I played Sea of Thieves with my buddy Eldon, and we were sailing around, and after we got past the novelty of, oh, like I actually have to like, you know, raise the freaking sails and like drop anchor and sail through this really pretty dynamic weather, we were like, there's nothing to do in this game, really. We're sailing around to these empty islands and struggling to actually find things to do. Over the years, though, it kept getting updates, and the PS5 version, when it finally released, got some really, really solid reviews. Double Fine post-acquisition put out Psychonauts 2, and a lot of people like to say, oh, Xbox didn't have anything to do with that, Microsoft didn't have anything to do with that, they were already working on it prior to being bought out. But for OG fans of Xbox already, y'all will remember that I interviewed Richard Horvitz, the voice of Rasputin Aquato, the main character of Psychonauts, and he literally said, yeah, we were running out of money despite raising so much through a Kickstarter, and then Microsoft came in and basically got this game over the finish line and let us do what we wanted to do.
We made $6 million like in 2 days. The game was great, but we were limited to a degree until Microsoft stepped back in and said, hey, do what you want to do. We're like, what?
So with that in mind, I am giving them credit. Without Microsoft stepping in, they wouldn't have been able to finish this game or ship it, and I'm glad that they did because it's really awesome. Critically, this game stands at an 87% on Metacritic. It usually lands at like an 8 or 9 out of 10. It also snagged a couple of award nominations and wins. They've sold at least 1.7 million copies of this game, which compared to like the big heavy hitter AAA games like Call of Duty, not a lot, but it's a lot for a studio like Double Fine, and it's the most copies of a game that they have ever sold. Looking at the Bethesda stuff we got post-acquisition, we've talked about this in another video that I did this week, but we got Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo, which were not available on Xbox for the first year of their life. We also got Hi-Fi Rush, we also got Redfall, and Starfield. Redfall, unfortunately, was a failure, both critically and commercially. The Tango Gameworks stuff like Hi-Fi Rush and Ghostwire Tokyo I really enjoyed, but I guess it didn't sell nearly enough to justify Microsoft keeping their doors open. They just killed the studio. I'm still pissed about that. Starfield critically reviewed decently. It's on like an 83% on Metacritic, 3 out of 5 stars on the Xbox Store. It is the only game to break into the top 10 most played titles on the Xbox platform, the only new game, I should say. And I'd say that's a win. Like, it's hard to compete with a bunch of kids playing Roblox and Fortnite. We don't really know sales numbers for Starfield. We know at least they sold 2.5 million copies. At one point, they came out and they were like, we've reached 10 million players. It did apparently lead to the largest single-day signups for Game Pass ever when it was added. So I think that's important to note, but Starfield also had a huge, massive budget, both in development and in marketing. So it has a higher ceiling to clear. Like, it needs more copies sold, more Game Pass subscriptions or signups in order to offset that cost. Mojang, post-acquisition, we got Minecraft Dungeons, Minecraft Legends. They're not supporting Minecraft Legends anymore. Obsidian, post-acquisition, in my opinion, has been the best, but there haven't really been any like breakout hits commercially. They put out games like The Outer Worlds, Pentiment, and also Grounded. All solid games, all good games, but they're not like huge breakout moneymakers, right? In Exile, post-acquisition, they got Wasteland 3, which again was another solidly reviewed game, but kind of flew under the radar. Compulsion Games, nothing from them since they put out We Happy Few. And Ninja Theory, the jury's still kind of out because their first post-acquisition game is coming out in just a couple of weeks with Hellblade 2. So looking at this list of games from just the acquisitions, post-Xbox Microsoft buying them, ignoring the other Xbox first-party stuff, just looking at this, has the output been worth the billions of dollars that Xbox Microsoft has invested in these studios? Maybe you can kind of make the case for yes, like all of the titles I was just listing, Psychonauts 2, Sea of Thieves, Grounded, Pentiment, whatever, they've been solidly reviewed games. Like, the only really truly bad one is Redfall, and considering the list of games that I just went through, that's a pretty good track record. But again, just looking at the output of games, has it been worth it as fans since they bought all these studios? And I gotta say, almost certainly fucking not. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're out there and you've been wanting a website for yourself, for your brand, but you've been overwhelmed at the thought of building one because you don't know anything about coding or anything related to website building, Squarespace is here for you. With Squarespace, you can take that website that's been brewing in your mind, the look of it, the feel of it, and translate it to a screen. You could start with any of the pre-built template designs, and there are a lot of them, and put your own unique spin on it to match your brand. You can easily integrate all of your social media platforms, you can throw in image galleries of your work, pretty much whatever you want. And of course, the end result will be a sleek, professional-looking page that your audience can really engage with. If you're like, Ray, I have heard enough, I want to join the millions of people that have trusted their website with Squarespace, you can go on over to their website and snag a free trial, try it out, see for yourself, and if you really like it, you can go and use my code XBOXReady at checkout to save 10% off of your first website or domain purchase. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Again, there are some really solid titles here, really unique, fun gaming experiences, but nothing that jumps off of the page as a runaway hit, smash success outside of maybe Starfield. Definitely nothing here that's recouping, without question, a billion-dollar investment or boosting Game Pass subs in a significant way. And yeah, you can make the argument of like, well, it's only been a couple of years since they finalized the Bethesda stuff, and, you know, they just got done finalizing the Activision Blizzard acquisition, so, you know, you gotta give them time, But guys, they bought Compulsion Games 6 years ago in 2018, and we haven't seen anything from them until they finally decided to ship South of Midnight. Why is it taking 6 years to see anything from these studios. That's crazy. And yes, I get it. Back in 2020, there was a global catastrophe. It offset a bunch of stuff, but still, I don't know. 6 years is just a little too crazy. Like, if I was to buy something, invest in something, and I didn't see any sort of return over 6 years, I would be pissed. It reminds me of those RDC sketches that they do with LeBron James in the locker room asking people for help, and D'Angelo Russell's like, come on, LeBron, you can't be mad. Like, we scored 10 points. We was really hooping out there. And then Mark Phillips as LeBron is like, these guys think they're hooping. I need help. Xbox needs help. They need output from these studios that they're buying and the studios that they had before. So let's dive into the specifics. Like, why are these studios, why are these acquisitions not producing, not delivering? You see, the common theme that we hear from these studios that have been bought out by Microsoft and are being overseen by Xbox is that they're very hands-off.
Do what you want to do. We're like, what?
And I get that approach. Like, I'm not sure a bunch of studios would be open to being bought out by a company that is going to come in and crack the whip and be like, no, you're not going to be working on the things that you want to be working on. You're going to be working on the things we want you to work on. Arcane Austin employees, after Redfall launched, were like, yeah, we were expecting Xbox to come in and cancel the game entirely and put us to work on something else. But they didn't. They just kind of left us to our own devices and then acted surprised when Redfall launched and everyone hated it. And Xbox even confirmed that. They were like, yeah, we weren't really involved in Redfall. We should have been more involved, more hands-on. But Starfield is going to be different because we're really involved from the ground up. So should Xbox risk being looked at as the villain and just be more heavy-handed? And I think the answer is yes. Like, you can't give studios leeway, come in and be like, yeah, work on whatever you want, do whatever you want, we want to support your creative vision, and then when their creative vision flops, punish them by shutting down the studio or laying off staff. They apparently shut down those Bethesda studios because they're like, yeah, we're shifting to priority Bethesda games. And to me, that says Fallout, Elder Scrolls, and Doom. But like, you should have made that shift 3 years ago. You should have come in and said, hey, Bethesda, we know that you're working on Starfield and that it's your dream game. It's the game that you've been working on for years and years and years. No, cancel that. No one wants that. We want Fallout 5. We want an Elder Scrolls 6. Like, who was sitting there thinking, yeah, like, oh, yeah, we know that there's a Fallout TV show, but we're not going to have any new Fallout content in the clip, a new Fallout game in the clip, so we're ready for it. Microsoft bought Bethesda. They were like, holy crap, the next Elder Scrolls is going to be Xbox exclusive, and we're still years away from that. That was a huge mistake. And now they're paying the price for that. They're like, okay, now we're going to get serious after we fired a bunch of these people when they should have just done it when they bought the damn thing. Like, they need to handle these studio acquisitions like other tech and entertainment companies handle their acquisitions and their buyouts. Like, when Apple buys a patent or a company, they don't sit on it for 6 years. They're like, no, this is going into the next iPhone. When Disney bought Star Wars, they weren't like, you know what, Lucasfilm, just do your thing. Like, we can wait 5, 6, 7 years until the next Star Wars thing. They were, no. And I know a lot of people are going to get after me because the Star Wars output has been up and down since Disney bought the rights to it. But they were like, no, we are going to put out as much Star Wars content as we possibly can. We're not going to wait 6, 10 years for y'all to pump out whatever. And while we're on the topic of these 6, 7, 8 year dev cycles, sequels especially, or spin-offs to existing franchises, I don't know if this is humanly possible, but they shouldn't take that long. We shouldn't be waiting 10 years for the next game. And we already have a proof of concept that we don't really need to take that long between sequels and titles to a franchise in order for them to be commercially or critically successful. Look at Marvel's Spider-Man on PlayStation 4, to Miles Morales and Marvel Spider-Man 2. Those are all games that did really well commercially and reviewed very well, but the gaps between them weren't very long because more or less they were the same. They were in the same engine, they had the same maps, they had slightly different combat and like web swinging mechanics, I guess, between the titles. But that didn't matter, right? People still bought them, people still enjoyed them, they were still successful. They didn't have to revolutionize the wheel or reinvent the wheel, I should say. They just pumped out the sequels because they know that's what people wanted. And Xbox should have known this. They should have made these acquisitions and been like, okay, Obsidian, we know know that you want to do the Outer Worlds 2, but we need you to do Fallout New Vegas 2. Bethesda, same thing. We need to get you working on either Fallout 5 or the next Elder Scrolls, because that is what the people want, and that's what's really going to move the needle for us. And because they weren't upfront with that, because they kind of flip-flopped on that, they've put themselves in a position where it's like, what developer would want to be bought out or want to work with Xbox now? Your studio gets bought by them. They feed you all this stuff about like, yes, we're here to support you. No matter what you do, we're going to be here for you, rooting for you, and enabling you to make your unique game with your voice, only for them to turn around and fire you when it doesn't work out. And then you're sitting there as a developer, as a studio head, a studio founder, with your life's work poured into this IP, and then once Microsoft fires you, you no longer have access to that. It's theirs now. And this is, of course, ignoring the other element to it. Is this Game Pass's fault? In my other video, I was like, I disagree, but I didn't really elaborate on it. But the stakes are definitely higher for Xbox because more and more data is coming out that gaming subscription services, they're stalled. They've kind of hit their ceiling. They're not going to grow anymore. And if they're not growing anymore, then it's not going to offset the cost for Xbox to keep putting day one titles onto the service. They're at 34 million Game Pass subscribers right now. And of course, the revenue from those subscribers has to go, a portion of it has to go to offsetting the cost for development and the sales that are lost for putting it onto the Game Pass day one. So if it's not growing, then it's not really a sustainable thing, right? But here's the thing about subscription services is that in order for them to keep growing and for people to stick around and continue to invest in them, you have to keep putting new stuff onto the platform. And right now, that's not happening at a rate that encourages growth. Like the big draw about Game Pass, similar to a streaming service like Netflix, is that you get to watch and play the latest and greatest releases day one as part of your subscription. But if there are no day one bangers being added, people aren't going to stick around and people definitely aren't going to be signing up for it. It all comes back to the games. If they can just make good on their promise to deliver games at a consistent clip, new, exciting, great games every couple of months or every month, then maybe Game Pass could work out. But so far the output has been very off and on, so we haven't really gotten to see if it can work yet. Like you look at the Game Pass library, there's a lot of solid stuff on there, but a lot of it is older. And if you've already played a lot of these games, then what's in it for you? Maybe I'm making too big of a deal out of this because Game Pass obviously is not the only way that you can play games on Xbox. It's not there yet. Like Game Pass subscriptions flatlining, not the same as Netflix subs flatlining. Like Netflix subs flatline, they're literally screwed because that is their only source of revenue. For Xbox, that's not the case. They still sell games on Xbox, on PC, on PlayStation, on all platforms. So just because Game Pass isn't doing as hot as we may have thought it would at this point in Xbox's life cycle, doesn't mean that they're shit out of luck. People can still buy games, and that's probably what it's going to have to be, right? Game Pass is an option, but the main focus is trying to sell people games. And I don't know if that means abandoning the whole day one concept, maybe like a game launches, you got to pay for it, and then a couple of months later, it comes to Game Pass. I don't know, but it's clear that Game Pass is gonna be like just a portion of the overall Xbox strategy versus the main course like many thought it would be at the beginning of this generation. So where does Xbox as a brand go from here? Once again, they are caught up in a storm of negativity surrounding their product and their approach. Well, first of all, they have to deliver on their upcoming projects. Games like Hellblade 2, Avowed, Fable, they don't have a lot of room to not be good. And I know that it's looking rough right now, but all of the potential, all of the promise that Xbox had at the beginning of this generation, at the beginning of this year, is still there. They're still sitting on a lot of interesting projects. They have a lot of really awesome IP that they can play with. Like if they drop Elder Scrolls 6 finally, and it's a banger, people will stop talking about all of this other stuff. Because truly, outside of the jobs lost, and that obviously sucks, no one's gonna miss like, oh, what do you mean I can't have Redfall anymore? We still have new hardware to look forward to. We still have the June showcase to look forward to. Summer Games Fest coming up as well. I'm locked in for that. And while we look at Xbox as like this one singular monolithic thing, Xbox is made up of a bunch of people, right? And I know a lot of those people, and they're good people, passionate people that care about about games and their jobs and want to make good stuff and put it out in the world. And at this point, all I could really do is make a bet on those people. I know that a lot of fans are piling on Phil saying like, oh, he's doing harm to the Xbox brand, more harm than good. We gotta stop giving him a pass. Here's my theory, and I know that it's like, this is just coming 100% from me. I don't know Phil personally. I've only met him a couple of times, but I feel like if it was up to him, things would look a lot different. I think we're seeing a lot of Microsoft coming in and changing up the roadmap that Phil initially maybe had planned for the next couple of years. The recent negativity, the closures, it seems more like a Microsoft thing and less like a Phil Spencer thing. Anyways, guys, that's all the Xbox stuff I have to talk about today. Thanks for kicking it with me in my beanbag chair. This is like my temporary filming setup while I wait for one of my desks to come in. If you made it this far into the video, consider subscribing. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.